I want you to close your eyes for just one moment and imagine this. You are 60, 3 years old. You have worked your entire life with your hands. You have calluses on your palms that tell the story of 40 years of honest labor. You wake up at 5 in the morning, not because you have to anymore, but because your body has forgotten how to sleep in. You make your coffee. You sit at your kitchen table in the quiet of the early morning, and for just a few minutes, before the world wakes up, everything feels peaceful. That was my life. That was my life. My name is Harold Eugene Mitchell. I am 60, 3 years old. I live in a modest two-story house on the edge of a small town in Ohio, in the same house where I raised my children, where my wife Linda and I planted a garden every spring, where my daughter Sarah took her first steps on those old hardwood floors that still creak in the same spots they always did. I was a simple man, a quiet man. Some people call men like me boring. My son-in-law Derek used to call me the old relic. He would say it with a smile, like it was a joke. I always smiled back, because that is what I do. I keep the peace. I was raised to respect people, to turn the other cheek, to let things go. I wish I had not let so many things go. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to a Tuesday morning in October. A morning that changed everything. I had a doctor's appointment downtown. Nothing serious, just a routine checkup. Linda wanted to come with me, but she had a cold that week, and I told her to rest. I kissed her on the forehead, told her I would be back before lunch, and I got in my truck. My truck, a 2009 Ford F-150. I maintained that truck like it was a member of the family. Oil changes every 3,000 miles. New tires last spring. I took care of my things. The drive downtown was normal. October light, leaves on the road, coffee in my cup holder. I was thinking about nothing in particular, just listening to the radio, an old country song I have remembered from 30 years ago. And then I came to the intersection on Maple and 4th Street. The light turned red. I pressed my brake pedal, and nothing happened. I want you to understand what that feels like. Your foot goes down, and the pedal just sinks to the floor, soft as a sponge, giving you nothing. And you are moving at 40 miles an hour toward a red light. And there are cars in the intersection, and everything in your body screams at once. I yanked the emergency brake. I swerved. I hit the curb so hard it blew out my front tire. The truck spun and came to a stop halfway up the sidewalk, 3 feet from a fire hydrant. I sat there for a long time. My hands were shaking so hard I could not hold the steering wheel. My coffee had spilled across the whole front seat. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. A young man knocked on my window. "Sir, are you okay, sir?" I was okay. Physically, I was okay. But something in the back of my mind was already whispering, "Harold, something is wrong. Something is very, very wrong." The tow truck came. I called Linda from the side of the road. She wanted to come immediately. I told her no, stay home, I am fine. I did not want to frighten her. I had the truck towed to Riley's auto shop, the place I had been going for 15 years. Pete Riley himself came out to meet me. He shook my hand, looked at the tire, looked at me, and said, "Harold, you look like you saw a ghost." I said, "Pete, my brakes gave out completely. Just nothing. I need to know what happened." He nodded seriously and got to work. I sat in the waiting room with a paper cup of bad coffee and watched the news on a TV mounted too high on the wall. I was not really watching. I was thinking, trying to remember if I had noticed anything strange about the truck. Any soft spots in the braking, anything. I could not think of anything. About 45 minutes later, Pete came through the door. He had grease on his hands, which was normal, but the look on his face was not normal. Pete Riley was a man who had seen everything. 30 years in auto mechanics. He was not easily disturbed. He looked disturbed. He sat down next to me, and he lowered his voice. even though we were the only two people in that waiting room. "Harold," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I said, "Pete, when have I ever been anything else?" He put a photograph on the table in front of me. A close-up photograph, taken on his phone, of what looked like a brake line. A rubber and metal line that runs underneath a vehicle and carries hydraulic fluid to the brakes. It was cut, not frayed, not worn, not cracked from age or cold, cut. Clean, deliberate, like someone had taken a blade to it and pressed just hard enough to leave a partial slice, not enough to fail immediately, but enough to fail gradually, to leak fluid slowly, until the pressure was gone and the brakes were useless. This did not happen by accident. Pete said quietly, "Harold, somebody cut your brake line." I stared at that photograph for a long, long time, and then I said the only words I could think of. "Are you certain?" Pete looked me in the eye. "I've been doing this for 30 years. I am certain." I drove home in Linda's car. She had come to get me after all. I could not stop her, and I sat in the passenger seat while my wife drove, and I did not say a word the entire way home. Linda kept glancing at me. She kept saying, "Harold, talk to me. Harold, please." But I had nothing to say yet, because I did not know yet who had done it, and I was not a man who accused without knowing. What I did not realize was that this was only the beginning. Let me tell you about my family, because you need to understand who these people were to me. Linda, my wife, 59 years old, the woman who had been by my side for 38 years, a gentle, trusting woman, the kind of woman who believes the best about everyone, always. She could not conceive of cruelty. It was not a weakness. It was just who she was. My daughter, Sarah, 34 years old, my little girl. I used to call her my sunshine, because when she was small, she had this way of walking into a room and making everything brighter. She had her mother's soft eyes and, once upon a time, her mother's gentle heart. But Sarah had changed over the years. I noticed it slowly, the way you notice a tree leaning not all at once, but by degrees. She had become harder, colder, more impatient with me. I told myself it was the stress of adult life. I told myself I was imagining it. And then there was Derek Mason, my son-in-law, 37 years old. He had married Sarah 8 years ago in a ceremony I paid for entirely, $22,000. I remember writing that check and feeling proud. Proud to give my daughter the wedding she had always dreamed of. Derek was tall, confident, good-looking, the kind of man who shakes your hand and looks you in the eye and smiles and makes you feel immediately like he is your friend. I liked him in the beginning. I genuinely liked him. Over the years, though, I began to see things. The way he talked to Linda, dismissive, like she was a child. The way he interrupted me at dinner, took over conversations, rolled his eyes when I told a story he had heard before. The way he borrowed money, $1,500 here, $3,000 there, and never once mentioned paying it back. When I brought it up carefully, once he laughed it off. "Harold, come on, family doesn't keep score." And Sarah, sitting right there beside him, nodded, like it made sense. I did not push the issue. I kept the peace. That is what I did. Derek had been pushing for something for 2 years. He wanted me to put his name on my life insurance policy. I had a policy, a good one, $450,000, taken out when I was 40 and paid faithfully every month for 23 years. The beneficiary was Linda, always had been, always would be. Derek brought it up the first time over a family dinner, casual, like as if it were nothing. "Harold, you should really think about splitting that policy. Linda would be taken care of, obviously, but it would just give Sarah and me some security too, you know, something to fall back on." I said, "Linda is my beneficiary, that's how I want it." He smiled, "Of course, just something to think about." I thought about it, and I decided no, He asked again 6 months later. I said no again. He asked a third time, and this time Sarah was with him, and she said, "Dad, why are you being so difficult about this? It would mean so much to us." I looked at my daughter. "My sunshine," I said, "Sarah, when I am gone, your mother will need to be taken care of. That is my only concern. Please don't ask me again." She looked at Derek. He gave a small shrug, and something passed between them, a look that I did not understand then. I understand it now. 3 weeks after the break incident, I was in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. Linda had gone to her sister's house for the weekend. I was alone in the house, which was unusual. Normally, Linda and I were together on weekends. I was making breakfast, eggs and toast, nothing complicated. I had just turned on the stove when I smelled it. Gas, not a faint trace. A strong, unmistakable smell of natural gas, the kind they add the sulfur to specifically so you can detect it. I turned off the stove immediately. I opened every window in the kitchen. I walked outside and stood in my backyard in the October chill in my pajamas, and I called the gas company. They came within the hour, 2 technicians. They went through the house with their equipment, checking every line, every connection. They found it behind the stove. A connection had been loosened. Not broken, not faulty, but loosened. As if someone had gotten behind the stove and turned a fitting deliberately, just enough to allow a slow leak. The technician, a young man with a clipboard, said, "Mr. Mitchell, were you home all night?" I said yes. He said, "Sir, if you had not smelled this when you did, and if you had turned on a burner without noticing, the accumulation of gas overnight in an enclosed kitchen, it could have been very serious, explosive potentially." I stood in my kitchen and looked at my stove and thought about Linda sleeping upstairs. Linda, who sometimes came down in the night for a glass of water, and might have switched on a light without thinking, creating a spark. And I thought about my brake line, and something cold settled into my chest. I called Pete Riley. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Harold, I don't want to alarm you, but 2 accidents is too many. You need to be careful, and you need to think hard about who has access to your house and your truck." I thought hard. The only people with keys to my house were Linda, Sarah, and Derek. I did not tell Linda about the gas connection. I did not want to frighten her. I told her only that there had been a minor leak, and the technicians had fixed it, which was true. But that night, after she had gone to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table in the dark, and I made a decision. I was going to find out what was happening in my own home. I am not a technical man. I was a machinist for 35 years, good with my hands, good with mechanical things, but not with electronics. So the next day, I drove to the electronics store, and I asked a young employee to help me. I told him I was having security concerns. He showed me a small system of 4 wireless cameras, no bigger than my thumb, each one able to connect to my phone. I installed them myself. It took me most of an afternoon. I put one in the kitchen, above the cabinet near the back wall, angled down toward the stove. I put one in the living room, tucked behind a row of books on the shelf. I put one in the hallway upstairs, hidden inside a smoke detector housing. And I put the last one in the garage, where my truck was usually parked. Nobody knew they were there, not even Linda. I set them to record continuously and to send motion alerts to my phone. I checked the phone constantly, obsessively, for the first week. Nothing out of the ordinary. Linda in the kitchen, the cat sleeping on the couch, the mailman's shadow passing the front window. I began to wonder if I was being paranoid. I began to feel ashamed of myself, suspicious of my own family, setting up cameras in my house like a man with something to hide, or worse, like a man afraid of the people he loved. Maybe it was just bad luck, I told myself. The brake line was old, and it wore thin, and it looked cut, but Pete was mistaken. The gas fitting came loose on its own. Old houses, old appliances. Things happen. I almost convinced myself. And then, on a Thursday afternoon in November, while I was at my old friend Ray's house watching football, my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the garage camera. I picked up my phone, I opened the camera app, and I watched. Derek's car was in my driveway. I recognized it immediately, a black Honda Accord, a dent in the rear bumper from when he had backed into a parking post last year, and tried to blame it on an unknown driver. He came in through the side garage door. He had a key. Of course he had a key. He did not know about the camera. He walked directly to my truck. He crouched down near the front wheel well. He had something in his hand. From the angle of the camera, I could not see clearly what it was. He was under the front end of the truck for approximately 4 minutes. Then he stood up, looked around, looked right at the camera without seeing it, because it was small and dark and hidden inside a vent cover, and he walked back out the side door. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I made myself breathe. I made myself think. I rewound the footage. I watched it again and again. I took screenshots. I sent the video to my own email immediately, then to a second email account I had created just for this purpose. Then I called Ray over, and I showed him. Ray was 65, a retired sheriff's deputy, and one of the only people in this world whose judgment I completely trusted. Ray watched the video twice. His face went very still. He said, "Harold, do not go home yet. Let me make some calls." Ray, it turned out, had kept contacts in the county sheriff's department. He made 3 phone calls. An hour later, a detective named Maria Vasquez came to Ray's house and sat at Ray's kitchen table and watched the footage on my phone. She asked me to walk her through everything, the brake line, the gas leak, the footage. She wrote in her notebook without expression, which I later learned was just how she worked. She was thorough and measured and did not telegraph her reactions. She asked, "Mr. Mitchell, do you have a life insurance policy?" I told her about the policy, $450,000. I told her about Derek asking 3 times to be added as a beneficiary. She wrote that down. She said, "Mr. Mitchell, I need you to do something very difficult. I need you to go home and act completely normal. Can you do that?" I said I could. I did not know if it was true. She said, "Do not confront him. Do not tell your wife yet. I know that is hard, but it is important. We need a few days." I drove home, and I sat at my kitchen table, and Linda made me a cup of tea, and she said, "Harold, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I looked at my wife, the woman I had loved for 38 years, and I said, "I'm fine, Linda. Just a little tired. I have told few lies in my life." That was one of the hardest. 3 days later, Saturday, Sarah and Derek came for dinner, as they sometimes did. Linda had made pot roast, Derek's favorite. Derek was in a good mood, joking, pouring wine, reaching over to squeeze Linda's hand and say, "Linda, you are the best cook in the state of Ohio." Linda beamed. I watched him across the table. I passed the bread. I refilled his water glass. I laughed at his jokes. Inside, I was a stone. After dinner, Sarah helped Linda with the dishes. Derek and I sat in the living room. He turned on the TV, a football game. He put his feet up on my coffee table, something he always did, something that had always bothered me, something I had never once mentioned, and he said, "Harold, you've been quiet tonight." "Everything okay?" I said. "Everything's fine, Derek. Just enjoying the company." He nodded and looked back at the game. 4 feet to his left, behind the row of books on the shelf, a camera was recording every second. Later that evening, after Derek and Sarah had gone home and Linda had gone to bed, I reviewed the kitchen footage from the day. And that is when I saw the second thing. I had been outside raking leaves in the afternoon, about an hour before Derek and Sarah arrived. The kitchen was empty. The footage showed Linda leaving the kitchen at 3:47 p.m. At 3:52 p.m., Derek arrived alone. Sarah had not come yet. She had texted that she was running late. Derek went into the kitchen. He opened the cabinet under the sink. He took something from his jacket pocket, a small bottle. I could not read the label, and he held it over Linda's large pot of roast on the stove. The pot that was simmering, that Linda had been tending all afternoon. He hesitated. Just for a moment, he hesitated. And then he put the bottle back in his pocket. He closed the cabinet. He straightened up and walked into the living room. I did not know then if he had put anything in the pot or not. The angle was not clear enough, but the motion, the intent, the bottle, that was enough. I called Detective Vasquez at 10 o'clock that night. I did not care about the hour. She picked up on the second ring. Over the following week and a half, I learned things that no father should ever have to learn. Detective Vasquez and her colleagues built a quiet, careful picture. Derek Mason had gambling debts, serious ones, over $60,000 owed to people who were not patient, not forgiving, not the kind of men you could ask for more time. He had researched my life insurance policy, his internet search history, which the police obtained through the proper channels, showed searches conducted 9 months earlier. Searches about how life insurance policies paid out. Searches about accidental death versus natural causes. Searches about how long investigations typically took before insurance companies processed claims. And there was one more thing. Sarah knew not everything, not the brake line, Detective Vasquez believed, not the gas fitting, but she knew about the insurance money. She had known Derek was in financial trouble. She had known he was desperate. And when he had told her, I do not know when, I do not know exactly what words he used, she had not stopped him. My daughter had not stopped him. When Detective Vasquez told me this, sitting in her office on a Tuesday afternoon, I did not cry. I did not shout. I sat in that chair and I felt something I had no word for, something bigger and emptier than sadness. Something like discovering that gravity has stopped working, that the floor beneath you is not solid, that everything you trusted was a story you told yourself. I thought about Sarah as a little girl, her small hand in mine, walking to school, teaching her to ride a bicycle in the driveway, running alongside her, promising I would not let go, and then gently, so gently, letting go. I had let go, and somehow, somewhere, I had lost her. On a Friday evening, 2 weeks after I had first shown the footage to Ray, Detective Vasquez called me and said they were ready. They had enough the footage, the financial records, the search history, Pete Riley's sworn statement about the brake line, the gas company technician's report, enough. They were going to bring Derek in for questioning the following morning. But first, Detective Vasquez asked me if I wanted to be there when they spoke to Sarah. She said it carefully. She said, Mr. Mitchell, this is your choice. Some family members prefer not to be present, but sometimes hearing it from a parent is what it takes. I said I would be there. That evening, I sat down with Linda and I told her everything. I had rehearsed it. I had thought about how to say it gently, how to cushion it. But there is no cushion for this. There is no gentle way. I showed her the footage on my laptop. The garage, Derek under the truck. The kitchen, Derek over the pot. I showed her Pete Riley's photograph of the brake line. I put it all in front of her, and I held her hand and I let her see it. Linda did not speak for a very long time. She sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten thousands of dinners, where our children had done their homework, where we had shared every important conversation of our adult lives. And she wept silently, tears just sliding down her face. Finally she said, Our Sarah. I said, she knew about the money. I don't think she knew the rest. Linda covered her mouth with her hand. She looked at me across the table, and she said something that I will never forget as long as I live. She said, Harold, All those times they were rude to you. All those times they talked down to you, and you just sat there quietly. You were always the better person, and this is how they repaid you. I squeezed her hand. I did not say anything. The next morning, we went together to the sheriff's department. Sarah arrived with Derek. They had both been called in separately, told only that there were questions relating to a home security matter. Detective Vasquez had been deliberate and careful in her wording. I was in a side room when Derek was taken to an interview room. A separate door, Sarah was brought into a conference room, and when she walked in and saw me sitting there, her father, her old, quiet, boring father, something crossed her face. Something complicated. Fear, maybe, or guilt, or both. She said, "Dad, what is going on?" I let Detective Vasquez do the talking. Vasquez was calm and professional. She explained what they had, the footage, the brake line, the gas fitting, Derek's debts, his searches. Sarah sat very still. Her face was white as paper. Detective Vasquez said, "Sarah, we know you were aware of your husband's financial situation. We know you were aware of your father's insurance policy and that your husband wished to be named a beneficiary. We need to know what else you knew." Sarah looked at me. She looked at her mother. Linda had her hands folded on the table, and she was looking at her daughter with an expression I cannot fully describe, grief and love and heartbreak all at once. Sarah said, "I didn't know about the truck. I swear to God, I didn't know about the truck or the gas." Her voice broke. He told me he was just going to talk to you, get you to change the policy. I knew he was desperate. I knew about the money he owed. I was scared, Dad. I was scared of what those people would do to him, to us, and I thought maybe if we had the money." She stopped. She put her face in her hands. "I thought about it," she whispered. "I thought about it, and I didn't say anything, and I should have. Dad, I should have. I looked at my daughter for a long time. I said, 'Sarah, you should have called me. You could have called me at any hour of any night, and I would have helped you, both of you. I would have found a way. I always found a way for you. That is what fathers do." She was crying now, hard, her shoulders shaking. "I know," she said. "Dad, I know. I'm so sorry. I did not say it was all right, because it was not all right. It was not something I could wrap up in easy forgiveness in a conference room on a Friday morning. That is not how real life works, and I was not going to pretend otherwise. But I reached across the table, and I covered her hand with mine. Because she was still my daughter, she would always be my daughter, and whatever happened next, I was not going to let go of her the way she had, for a time, let go of me. Derek was arrested later that morning. He was charged with attempted murder, criminal tampering, and several other things I could not keep track of. His lawyer entered a not guilty plea, which surprised no one. I will not walk you through the legal proceedings in detail. That is not what this story is about. What I will tell you is that Derek ultimately took a plea agreement to avoid a full trial. He was sentenced to 12 years. He will be eligible for parole in 9. Sarah was not charged. Detective Vasquez believed her account that she had not known about the specific attempts on my life. But Sarah knew things she should have told someone. She carries that, and she will carry it for the rest of her life. That is its own kind of sentence. Linda and I stayed in our house, the house with the creaking floors and the garden we planted every spring. Some evenings I sit at the kitchen table and I look at the spot above the cabinet where the first camera used to be, and I think about how close it all came. How close the brake line came to working. How close Derek's hand came to that pot. And then Linda comes in from the living room and she asks if I want tea, and I say yes, and we sit together in the quiet of the evening, and I think, I am still here. We are still here. Sarah calls now, not every day, but she calls. Our conversations are careful, tender, like walking across ice that you are not sure will hold. We are building something back, slowly, out of the wreckage. I do not know what it will look like when we are done. Maybe it will never look like what it was before, but we are building. She came over last Sunday. She sat at that kitchen table. Linda made pot roast, not the same pot. We threw that one away, but the same recipe, and the three of us ate together, and it was quiet, and it was sad, and it was also real. After dinner, Sarah helped me clear the table, and she stopped, and she said, "Dad, I keep thinking about all the times I let Derek talk to you the way he did. All the times you just sat there, and took it and never said a word. How did you do that?" I thought about it. I said, "Because I knew who I was, Sarah. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I knew." She nodded. She did not say anything more. But she hugged me before she left, a long, tight hug, the kind she used to give me when she was 7 years old, and I came home from work, and she would run at me from across the yard. I held on as long as she would let me. I have thought a long time about whether to tell this story. It is not easy to stand in front of the world and say, "My son-in-law tried to kill me for the insurance money, and my daughter knew he was desperate and said nothing, and I sat at dinners for years, being dismissed and belittled by a man who was planning my funeral. It is not easy. It is humiliating in a way. It makes me look like a fool. But here is what I have come to understand. I was not a fool. I was a father, a husband, a man who valued peace over conflict, who chose silence over argument, who truly believed, that love meant absorbing the hurt and not throwing it back. I was not wrong about that. I am still not wrong about that. What I was wrong about was thinking that keeping the peace meant keeping secrets. It does not. Sometimes love means saying the hard thing. Sometimes love means not letting cruelty pass without a word. Not for your own pride. Pride has nothing to do with it, but because silence in the face of wrong can look like permission. I gave Derek permission with my silence to believe I did not matter, that I was the old relic, the background noise, the man whose name on a policy was more valuable than his life. I will not make that mistake again. And here is the other thing I want to say, the thing I want you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever family you are sitting inside of right now, to hear. The quiet ones are watching, the fathers who do not argue back, the mothers who swallow their hurt, the elderly parents who eat alone while their children are busy. They see everything. They notice every dismissal, every impatience, every eye roll at the dinner table. They just choose not to make a scene. Do not confuse that choice for blindness. And one more thing. The people who love you most are not always the ones who talk the loudest. Sometimes they are the ones who sit at the end of the table, quietly drinking their coffee, watching over everything, making sure everyone is fed and warm and safe, and asking for nothing in return. Value those people before it is too late, before you have to stand in a sheriff's office on a Friday morning and watch your choices become a criminal record, before the only time you hold their hand is across a conference room table when everything has already burned. Life has a way of balancing things, not always in the ways we expect, not always on our timeline, but the scales do move eventually. A man who was dismissed at his own table is still alive. A man who treated him like he was invisible is sitting in a prison cell. A daughter who looked away when she should have looked straight at the truth is rebuilding her life from the ground up, one honest conversation at a time. And a woman named Linda is in her kitchen right now, making coffee, humming something old and familiar. And in a few minutes she will call up the stairs for me, and I will come down, and we will have our morning together, as many mornings as God gives us, every single one. Respect the quiet ones in your life. They are not weak because they do not shout. They are not unaware because they do not confront. And they are certainly not invisible, even when you treat them that way. What you do in the dark will always find the light. I am Harold Eugene Mitchell. I am 63 years old. And I am still here.